Yes.
Dr. Rice, are you aware of the report at the time that ISI chief was in Washington on September 11 and on September 10th, $100,000 was wired from Pakistan to these groups here in this area? And why he was here? Was meeting with you or anybody in the administration?
I have not seen that report, and he was certainly not meeting with me. Yes?
LA Weekly reported that on the very evening of September 11th, U.S. State Department officials began negotiating the terms of the U.S.-Pakistani partnership with ISI Director Mahmoud Ahmed, the very man who was alleged to have ordered the wire transfer to Mohammed Atta. The talks continued over the next several days before the Lieutenant General returned to Pakistan on September 14th. But an undercover operative named Randy Glass says he can prove that USA officials knew about the ISI role in 9/11 even as they chose to partner with Pakistan. The revelation came in yet another largely overlooked story.
The story of Randy Glass never seemed to quite catch on. If you ask most people, have you heard about this? Have you heard about Randy Glass? They haven't heard about it.
I had been threatened by FBI agent Steve Brodowski that if I mentioned any of that, I would be charged with obstruction of justice.
2 months later, the Palm Beach Post ran this story.
During the course of the conversation, I asked him exactly what his intentions were. After dinner, as we walked outside, he pointed in the direction of the World Trade Center and said, "Those towers are coming down."
I've watched all this, finger pointing and namings of names and all that stuff. Our objective is to secure the country. And we've had investigations. We had the 9/11 Commission. We had to look back this. We've had to look back that.
During the war with Afghanistan,
Great story.
you reported that during a key battle, our side in that battle had the enemy surrounded. There were a reported perhaps 8,000 enemy forces in there.
Maybe even more, but certainly minimum that many.
It's your story, take it.
Well, they had the cream of the crop of Al-Qaeda caught in a town called Kunduz. It's in one little village, and it's a couple hundred kilometers, 150 miles from the border of Pakistan. And I learned this story, frankly, through very, very clandestine operatives we have in the Delta Force and other very... We were operating very heavily and with a small number of men, 300-400 really, in the first days of the war. And suddenly, one night when they had everybody cornered in Kunduz, the Special Forces people were told there was a corridor that they could not fly in. There was a corridor sealed off, the United States military sealed off a corridor. In other words, nobody could shoot anybody in this little lane that went from Kunduz into Pakistan.
You can't protect America unless we give those people on the front lines of protecting this country the tools necessary to do so within the Constitution. And that's where the debate is here in the United States. There's some decent people who evidently don't believe we're at war.
And that's how I learned about it. I learned about it from a military guy who wanted to fly helicopters and kill people and couldn't do it that day.
So we had the enemy surrounded. The Special Forces guys are helping surround this enemy.
They're whacking everybody they can whack. That looks like a bad guy.
Suddenly they're told to back off
from
and
a certain
let
area.
planes fly out to Pakistan.
There was about 3 or 4 nights in which I can tell you maybe 6, 8, 10, maybe 12 more or more heavily weighted Pakistani military planes flew out with an estimated no less than 2,500, maybe 3,000, maybe more. I've heard as many as 4,000 or 5,000. They were not only Al-Qaeda, but they were also, you see, the Pakistani ISI was the military advisors to the Taliban and Al-Qaeda.
The only way to protect this country is to stay on the offense, is to deal with threats before they fully materialize, and in the long term help democracy succeed like Afghanistan and Iraq.
There were dozens of senior Pakistani military officers, including 2 generals, who flew out. And I also learned after I wrote this story that maybe even some of bin Laden's immediate family were flown out on those evacuations. We allowed them to evacuate. We had an evacuation.
How high up was that evacuation authorized?
I am here to tell you it was authorized. Donald Rumsfeld who we'll talk about what he said later. It had to be authorized at the White House, but certainly at the Secretary of Defense level.
The Department of Defense said to us that they were not involved and that they don't have any knowledge of that operation.
That's what Rumsfeld said when they asked.
And but there's a difference of opinion. It'll come clear during this campaign. Well, people will say, get out, leave, before the job is done. And those are good, decent, patriotic people who believe that way. I just happen to believe they're absolutely wrong. And so I'm going to continue to work to protect this country. We'll let history judge all the different, finger pointing and all that business. I don't have enough time to finger point. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I've got to stay. I got to do my job, which comes home every day in the Oval Office, and that is to protect the American people from further attack. Now there's some who say, well, maybe it's not going to happen. Well, they don't see what I see. All I ask is that they look at that terror plot that, along with the Brits, we helped stop. People who are going to get on an airplane and blow up innocent lives in order to achieve political objectives. They're out there, they're mean, and they need to be brought to justice.
The terrorists attacked us and killed 3,000 of our citizens before we started the freedom agenda in the Middle East. They were... What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
If you lived in Iraq and lived under a tyranny, you'd be saying, God, I love freedom. Because that's what's happened. Gabrielle.
Mr. President, in your speeches now, you rarely talk or mention Osama bin Laden. Why is that? Also, can you tell the American people if you have any more information, if you know if he is dead or alive? Final part here. Deep in your heart, don't you truly believe that until you find out if he is dead or alive, you won't really eliminate the threat of...
Well, deep in my heart, I know the man's on the run if he's alive at all. And who knows if he's hiding in some cave or not. We hadn't heard from him in a long time. And the idea of focusing on one person is really indicates to me people don't understand the scope of the mission. Terror is bigger than one person. And he's a person who's now been marginalized. His network is, his host government has been destroyed. He's the ultimate parasite who found weakness, exploited it, and met his match. He is, as I mentioned in my speech, I do mention the fact that this is a fellow who is willing to commit youngsters to their death, and he himself tries to hide, if in fact he's hiding at all. So I don't know where he is. Nor do, I just don't spend that much time on him, to be honest with you.
A few moments on our political ticker this Tuesday, Democratic presidential candidate Dennis Kucinich is taking his criticism of President Bush to a new level. In an interview with the Philadelphia Inquirer's editorial board, the Ohio congressman said he seriously believes Americans have to start asking questions about Mr. Bush's mental health.
She's still telling me what to do. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We wrote the tape on that?
Just a one-finger victory salute.